There was a shimmer on the bathroom carpet when I walked in, reflection of the sunlight that was just beginning to break through the blinds. It didn't blind me, it just caught my attention. I looked down to see what was there. Since I was barefoot, I didn't want to step on glass or anything. Caroline didn't mention that she dropped anything in the bathroom, but who knew? I didn't notice it at first because without the light, it was almost the same color as the carpet. But eventually I found it. A tiny circle of foil fell to the floor and reflected light into my eyes as I entered the bathroom. I picked it up. It was the pill strip backing, the little circle of foil that pops out when you squeeze the pill out of the strip. Most of the time it stays attached to the strip, but sometimes, as in this case, it comes loose and falls to the floor. I examined her. It was blank on one side, but had markings on the other side. 2. Since it was Wednesday, I assumed that meant Tuesday, yesterday's pill. This meant that the pills had to be taken daily. I knew I was taking no medications, I was 35 years old, and I was as healthy as a cucumber, as was my wife, Caroline. We had both recently had our annual physicals and were found to be healthy and fit, so why was there a pill pad in my bathroom? I knew there were several pills to take daily, but one that came to mind was the birth control pill. Caroline hadn't been on the pill, or at least I thought she hadn't, since I had a vasectomy 2 years ago after the birth of our second and last child. She had no problems with cramps or period pain, and was one of those lucky women who had trouble-free periods. So why pills? I have to admit that my first thought was that she might have some illness that she didn't want to tell me about. For a few minutes, my thoughts went to very dark places, but I again remembered the physical examination and how we showed each other the reports. We were both clean. If the little circle of foil was here, then most likely the pills were here too. I closed and locked the door. Caroline was still in bed and began to search. It took me a while to find them, but eventually I found them. They were buried at the bottom of a box of tampons, in a box of aspirin. When I pulled out the strip of pills, I immediately recognized them as the ones she had been taking before I had the surgery, and even before that, between our children when we weren't trying. Why did she start taking the pills again? I had only one answer to this question. She had sex with someone who could get her pregnant. She cheated on me. Caroline and I were together for 9 years. I had just graduated from university and was studying to become an engineer, and she was working as an assistant. We met at a bar, and although we didn't hit it off right away, there was enough interest for her to accept my invitation to dinner. Caroline was tall, only a couple of inches shorter than my 5'10". She was a former athlete and retained an athletic build, a thin figure and small breasts. Her ass, by far my favorite part of her body, was simply amazing. We courted for about a year and then got married when I was 26. Our 2 children were 5 and 2 years old, and I had surgery to prevent any further accidents. 2 was our limit. We had the perfect set. James was born first and then Sonia. I had an impeccable family, or so I thought. Caroline returned to work, taking maternity leave for each of her children, not wanting to leave the job she loved. We had an au pair who came to look after the children during the day and went home in the evening. She cost almost as much as Caroline made, but Caroline didn't care. She just wanted to leave home and work at a job she loved. I worked with a couple of buddies, creating an engineering firm between us. We were never rich, but we all had a very good time. I cleaned up the bathroom, put her pills back, and decided I needed to think about it. There was no point in confronting her now. I needed a plan. I needed proof. What happens after this? I had no idea. First, you need to collect all the facts and then see where it leads. I went to work as usual and considered my options. First, I wanted to know who and when, and also for how long. Was it someone at work, God forbid, her boss? Is this the same person she was communicating with before we met? This brings me to my next terrible question. Were these children even mine? All this time, I didn't let my emotions get in the way. I knew this would happen, that I would feel loss, betrayal, pain, and anger. But first, I needed to figure out if it really happened. I was working on the problem, and didn't yet have enough facts to draw any conclusions. I went on the internet. First of all, I needed DNA analysis kits. Testing children would be, child's play. I often put them to bed before Caroline arrived, so this could be done easily. I also ordered surveillance equipment, a couple of small voice recorders that I could hide in her car and bag, and a few tiny cameras that I could hide around the house. I doubted she was doing it there, considering she was rarely in the house when I wasn't there, or at least I didn't think so. I needed access to her phone. I knew about a cloning tool through which I could get a copy of her phone, get all her messages and emails, and even listen to her calls. To do this, I needed to buy another phone. It took several days for everything to be delivered. During this time, I watched her carefully. Caroline didn't do anything unusual. Our sex life was pretty standard, once or twice a week, usually on the weekends when we both stayed up late in bed. I never smelled anything suspicious on her, and she never jumped into the shower as soon as she got home. Nothing changed, so either she didn't have an affair, or she was being extremely discreet, and either she had an affair for so long that it became second nature. The packages arrived on Friday morning. I asked them to be sent to my office so that there would be no questions. I had DNA test kits, voice recorders, several cameras, a cell phone, and a cloning kit. I was ready to go. That day, I left the office early. When I returned home, the au pair was just feeding the children dinner before putting them to bed. I left her to deal with this matter, and I went and hid the cameras. One in the bathroom, one in the living room, and the third in the bedroom, with a good view of the bed. I heard the kids splashing in the bathroom and went to help them get ready for bed. Taking Sonia, I left the au pair with James. Having made a swab from Sonia's cheek, I put it in my pocket. Then I laid her down and read to her until she dozed off. When I checked on James, he was still awake and the au pair was still reading to him. I offered to replace her and let her go home, and she gratefully agreed. It didn't take long for him to take the swab, and in less than 20 minutes, he too was fast asleep. I packaged the swabs along with the swab taken from my cheek and put them in the mailbox. The postman will pick them up in the morning. The service promised results would be available online within 48 business hours. So, that means Wednesday. Caroline arrived home right on time, and we went about our normal business. She told me about her day, and I told her about mine, neither of us listening to the other. We had dinner, and then she went to the shower. Taking this opportunity, I installed voice recorders in her car and bag and cloned her mobile phone. I checked the clone to see if there were any incriminating messages or emails, but there were none. Either she was very careful or she didn't cheat. I couldn't decide. The weekend went by as usual. We had sex both mornings before the kids woke up. It became almost a ritual, almost even a routine. On weekends, she had no calls or messages, and since we spent all our time together, I had no way to check if she was taking the pills, although I checked the strip and the corresponding days disappeared. Since it was just her and me in the house over the weekend, and I didn't take the pills, I fairly concluded that she did. On Monday, I told her that I would be working from home. She went to the office, and I took the opportunity to take out the flash drives from all the cameras and check them. The bathroom camera confirmed that she had, indeed, taken the pills. But the real surprise was on the bedroom camera. On Saturday night, while I was preparing dinner, she took a shower. In the bedroom, I saw her using her phone to text someone. There was nothing on the phone I cloned, so she must have a second phone. It definitely wasn't in her bag, so where was it? I watched what she did with him when she finished writing the message. She walked over to the ventilation duct and, releasing the latch, opened it, hiding the phone inside. I immediately went and checked the air duct and found that the phony was not there. She must hide it there when she is at home, but she takes it with her when she leaves. I needed access to this phone. This was the first concrete evidence that she was up to something, although I still didn't know what it was. There were signs that she was cheating, but it wasn't certain. I watched the footage of her getting dressed that morning and saw her take the phone from the vent unit and put it in her bag before leaving for the day. I needed this phone. In the evening, when she returned home, I watched her carefully. She casually dropped her bag in the hallway and continued her usual evening routine. After dinner, she took a shower and I looked in her bag. There was no telephone there. She must have taken it with her and hidden it in the ventilation unit when she went upstairs. She didn't know or didn't care that on the other side of the vent was Sonia's room. Quietly, listening, I crept into my daughter's bedroom and opened the window on her side. There was a phone there. I grabbed it, took it to my office, and cloned it onto my new phone in a couple of minutes. I returned it and was almost closing the window when I heard my wife getting out of the shower. I approached and sat down by Sonia's bed and began stroking her hair when my wife entered. "Something happened?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "I like to come and sit with one or the other of them from time to time," I whispered, "just to remind myself how lucky I am to have two such wonderful children." She smiled. "You are a soft old man," she said. "Come on, let's go before you wake her up." I was able to look at the clone of the phone only the next day. That's when my world collapsed. The sound of my secretary's intercom did not penetrate as I sat in my office chair and stared at the cloned messages, tears streaming down my face. Eventually, she apparently got tired of trying and knocked briefly before entering my office. She poked her head through the door and saw me. Michelle, my secretary, was an emotionless woman who dressed much older than her years. I would give her between 30 and 40 years old. She was slim, with red hair and green eyes. She always dressed conservatively, in clothes that would be appropriate on someone much older. Our relationship has always been 100% professional. I never even raised an eyebrow in her direction, although I saw the result when someone did it. It wasn't pretty. I had to talk to one of my business partners who was known as the office ladies' man. He flirted with her because he couldn't bear the thought of a woman who wouldn't fall for his charms. She told me in no uncertain terms that if he didn't quit, she would quit and sue the company not only for constructive dismissal, but also for sexual harassment. She told me that the only reason she hasn't done this yet is because I always treated her with respect and never did anything I shouldn't have done. My business partner was furious and wanted to fire her immediately. He gave us an ultimatum: either she will leave or he will. So I became the owner of 60% of the company's shares instead of the 40% with which I started. I had one less partner. Michelle immediately left when she saw me, apparently to deal with whatever she was trying to call me about. I heard voices in my outer office, and then everything went silent. Michelle returned to my office, closed and locked the door. Then she came over and, moving a chair from the other side of my table, sat down a meter away from me and facing me. She pulled out some napkins from where women always seem to have a supply and handed them to me. I took them blindly and started wiping my eyes. "Tell me," was all she said. I showed her the phone. There were text messages from Caroline and back. The other party was not named, no names were used, but they talked about secret meetings and sex that seemed to go on forever. Whoever it was, he knew her well. Talked about things that only I should know about the small mole on the inside of her thigh, about the cute sounds she made during sex. There were other details that only a lover could know, and not just a casual lover, long-term lover. I was never mentioned in any of the texts. It was as if I did not exist. There was no, "Did he get out of the way?" or "He said or did this or that." I simply wasn't there. There wasn't even an extraneous thought. "Do you know who?" she asked, still being businesslike. I shook my head. "How do you know?" she asked. I told her about finding a small silver bookmark on the bathroom floor, then about the pills. The story just flowed like a river. The whole time I was talking, she just sat and looked at me. After a while, I realized that she was holding my hand. This was the first time, I thought, that we had actually touched each other. "You need more information," she said. "The children's DNA will be obtained on Wednesday. Can you hold out until then?" "I don't know," I said. She nodded. "Our producers in Portland need to see you urgently," she said. "I booked you a ticket for the next flight. You'll be back on Thursday." "I can't think about it now." "That's what you tell Caroline," she said. She took my phone typed a text message, and sent it to Caroline. "Something happened in Portland. We need to go and figure it out. I'll be back on Thursday. Love you." The answer came almost instantly. "Okay, let me know you got there. I'll see you when you get back." She looked at the phone for a second, her lips curling. Then she gave me my phone back and took out hers. "Lorraine," she said. "Michelle." "Yes, thank you. When are you free this afternoon?" "Great. See you then." "Go get yourself in order," she told me in a businesslike manner. The tone of voice and the fact that I was almost conditioned by her to do what she told me in the office meant that I did just that. It was actually nice not having to think. Postponing decisions and plans for someone else. When I came out of the bathroom, she was holding my jacket. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You have an appointment with an old friend of mine," she said. I just went. Lorraine turned out to be Michelle's best friend and also a divorce lawyer. She was apparently working on Michelle's divorce when she discovered her husband was cheating on her with one of his employees. Michelle explained the situation to Lorraine, and I watched in almost a state of stupor. This didn't happen to me. Lorraine has obviously seen this many times in her career. Once she had all the facts we had, she turned her attention to me. "Gary," she said. It wasn't me. She was talking to someone else. I felt pain in my cheek. Michelle slapped me. I woke up from surprise. I saw shock and amusement in Lorraine's eyes, but they quickly disappeared when she looked at me. "Gary?" she asked. I nodded. "Do you have any ideas what you want to do with this?" At these words, my engineer brain woke up. Plans were what he was good for. "Kill them both," I said. I expected at least a shocked exclamation from Michelle, but surprisingly she even grinned. "Okay," said Lorraine. "I understand it. But unfortunately, this is not an option. You see, this is against the law. However, we have several legal options. Let's look at them." "Before I start," she said, "I'm just laying out your options. I am not advocating any of them. This may happen later. The first option is to do nothing. She doesn't know that you know, but as far as I'm concerned, you've had a pretty happy life, and that shouldn't change. Keep up the good work, playing the ignorant game. Secondly, an amicable divorce. File a statement of irreconcilable differences. Divide your company, home, finances. She makes less than you, so you will probably have to pay child support for her for several years, at least for the children until they graduate from high school. Thirdly, act nuclear. Sue for adultery. If the children are not yours, sue for a fake birth certificate. Sue whoever the other party is for alienation of affection. If he is the father, sue him to get back all the money you spent on the kids. If he is a co-worker, sue him for not following the fraternization policy. Nowadays, almost every company has such a policy. If the other party is married, provide their partner with all the information about the affair. If she knows, then we can have a case against her. If not, then perhaps I can represent her interests in the divorce. Make it public. Tell everyone, friends, relatives, colleagues. If she is a member of any societies or church groups, tell them too. Humiliate her with all your might. We need to protect your assets, sell your share of the company into an offshore trust, mortgage the house, take whatever you can, take the cash along with the money you get from the company, cash out your 401k, and throw a party in Vegas. My thoughts raced through my head like a whirlwind. I instantly understood what she was saying. Option 1 was not an option. I was no one's willing cuckold. I've been a weak-willed, unconscious cuckold for too long. Option 2? Not a chance. I spent too much time building the business and giving us the lifestyle we had. She can forget about taking half of everything I have and then continue to let me support her while she has fun with someone else. Option 3, I said. Nuclear. Lorraine smiled. Fine. Then I'll start filling out the paperwork. I would suggest starting covert surveillance of your wife and trying to find out who, when, and where. We really need more evidence. Can I keep this phone? You see that it is not doing you any good. I nodded and handed her the phone. Michelle and I left Lorraine's office, and she took me to a small family hotel. She booked a room for me. "Go take a shower and order something for your room," she said. she took full responsibility. "I'll be back later with some things for you." I acted mechanically. My whole world was falling apart, and I was sitting in a hotel room ordering room service as if I was on a walk. This was the only way I could cope with the stress of what was happening. 9 years on the toilet. What really hurt was that I was completely oblivious to all of this. How did I not notice what she was doing? Who was it? The same boss to whom she returned after each child. She told me that she liked her job and her independence. But was that the real reason, or she just couldn't stand being away from her lover for so long? I looked speculatively at the minibar and was about to give in when Michelle entered the room. "Don't even think about it," she said. "I need you to think and not drown your sorrows. You need to plan, and you can't do that if you look at the world through the bottom of a bottle." "To plan?" I asked gloomily. "I tried. I had a plan, and it was a good plan. I had a loving wife and 2 gorgeous children, and now look where I am. I have a cheater as my wife, and I don't even know if these 2 children are mine. I'm the biggest cuckold in the world. My whole life is falling apart. And you want me to plan it all?" She looked at me for a few moments. I waited for her to say something, maybe sympathize with me, maybe even hug me. Then she looked at her watch. "Okay," she said, all businesslike. "The pity party is over. How many times when we were starting a company did you run into obstacles and your plans fell through? What does this have to do with—" "How many?" she insisted. "I don't know," I said. "A whole bunch. There was a time when the patent office lost a patent application for an inversion filament, and we won the deal against Headingley. There was a time when the bank tried to foreclose on us early because they were under pressure. There was a time—" "Okay," she said. "At what point, in all those times, did you sit down, put your head in your hands, and give up? That was different." "Why?" she asked. "What was different in those days?" "Then I had something to fight for," I said. "I had a family that depended on me. I had—" "Now you have a family," she said, "which also depends on you. And it is much larger than the family you have at home. 141 people and their families are depending on you to handle this. None of your partners are capable of keeping the company afloat. You are all engineers, but of the 3 of you, you are the only businessman. If you lose, the company loses. Do you think this bitch cares about the families that depend on your company? If she gets half, she'll sell it to the highest bidder and you'll lose control of the business. You know who's going to buy it, and Headings will own everything you've worked on. Do you want this?" I stared at her. She was right. I've worked too long and too hard to let it all go to whoever gives this bitch more money. I needed to get everything in order to secure my future and the future of my family. If the kids were mine, I'd make sure they were taken care of. But as for Caroline, well, she made her own bed. I can grieve this relationship when I'm sure everything else is fine. My confusion cleared and, driven by anger and determination, I sat down with Michelle and began to make plans. I was going to secure the future of the company and take care of the only family I had left. It was the moment I made this decision that everything fell into place. The pain went away, the indecision disappeared. I had no doubts. Michelle saw the change in my expression and nodded in satisfaction. "That's the kind of Gary I need right now," she said. "Someone who knows how to plan for the future." We spent the rest of the evening making plans on how to secure the future of the company. At first, I was in favor of selling my shares in the company to partners, but Michelle rejected this idea. She felt that I could not trust them to run the company or leave it in my hands once they became the majority shareholders. They will destroy it to the ground. I need to maintain control. In the end, we decided that we could create an offshore trust to which I would sell the company at market price. I would then remain with the same trust as the CEO on minimum salary. I would earn virtually nothing. Because the trust was offshore, the courts would have no jurisdiction over its documents, so the owners of the trust would not be known. Now I was a millionaire, at least on paper, or would be when all this was done. I needed to get rid of all this capital. I also needed to cash out my 401k and free up all the equity on the house. Although we were together when we bought the house, it was only in my name as Caroline was not working at the time of purchase. She was carrying James, and the mortgage advisor told us it would be easier to put the loan in my name as she was not earning at that time. I made a list of what I needed to do and wrote to my lawyer who was handling the company's legal affairs to set up a meeting the next day. After Michelle left, I took a shower and went to bed, not expecting to sleep for long. I passed out almost as soon as my head hit the pillow and slept, until the alarm on my phone woke me up the next day. On my phone, there was a message from Caroline. "You didn't inform me of your arrival. Is everything okay?" "Sorry. I planned it until late. Then I fell asleep. Everything is coming together now. I should be back on Thursday." "Okay. See you. Love you." XX. I did not respond to this message. I just couldn't bring myself to type those words. Michelle knocked on my door a little after 8. I took another shower and was just thinking about going to breakfast. "Breakfast," she said, indicating that I should follow her. We went to a diner down the street and sat in a booth, eating bacon and pancakes with maple syrup. Part of me couldn't understand why I was acting this way, as if my world didn't collapse and my heart didn't burst out. My reasoning was that at some point, when the dust had settled, it would all come down on me. However, I did not want this, but for now I needed to work. "Brian Spencer," Michelle said, calling the name of my lawyer, "called and said he had time at 10 to meet with us. We can go to your bank first and cash out your 401k and also release equity from your house before we go there." "I understand that consolidating my money is worth it," I said, "but there is still a record that I had it all. Can't the court just order me to pay her half?" "Only if you still have them," Michelle grinned. "That's where Vegas comes in. Once you have all this capital, you go and spend a week in Vegas and blow a lot of money, and all this before you file for divorce. That way, when you are judged in court, you will be poor. In debt, actually. The bank will foreclose on your house, and your salary will barely be enough to live on. This is provided that the children are not yours. If they're yours, you'll simply put your entire 401k in trust for them, for their college fund. Caroline won't be able to touch him. Technically, she will earn more than you. She can easily afford the house on her own, and may even end up paying you alimony. When will you get the DNA results?" "The company said the results should appear on the internet sometime today," I said, picking up the phone. I checked the email the company sent me, and there was a link that I clicked on. It started to load, but then I put the phone down. I wasn't sure I was ready to see the results yet. "Can?" Michelle asked, and I pushed the phone towards her. She took it and looked at the screen, scrolling up a few times. I watched her face, looking for clues, trying to guess from her expression what she might say. She looked up from the phone. "The results are not ready yet," she said. "According to the tracking data, they should be received within the next 12 hours. I let out a breath I didn't even know I had. "Let's go," she said, getting up. "The bank should already be open." Freeing up equity in the house and cashing out my 401k took surprisingly little time. I closed all of our savings accounts, including our children's college funds, and transferred the money to an account I opened in my name. The only account I left alone was the joint account we use daily. In any case, there was less than $10,000 in this account. My lawyer stuck a huge paddle into our plans, but if it can be done in a good way, he did it. "You are forgetting one thing," he said when we outlined our plan to him. "You have a marriage contract." "I have?" I was surprised. I had no idea. "That was a condition of the partnership agreement when you started working," he reminded me. All partners were required to enter into a prenuptial agreement that would protect the company in the event of a breakup. It only applies to the company, but it does not have any rights over the assets of the company. For divorce purposes, you are an employee of the company, and therefore, at best, it can claim your salary and 401k. That's all. "What I would suggest," he said, "and I don't mean to say anything bad about your divorce lawyer's plan, is to use all the equity you have freed up from the house and 401k and invest in the company." Buy out one of your partners. I know that Robert hinted at a desire to make money. You don't have enough funds for this, but you could take out a loan from the company pension fund to make up the difference. Payments will be made from your salary, which means your income will be much less when you are assessed for assets. And since everything else will be tied to the company, it is sacrosanct. Your credit rating will take a hit when the bank forecloses on your house, and you'll lose half of everything you have left in the bank. But other than that, she won't get anything. We can make your salary less than hers, so she may even end up paying you child support. What can I live on? I asked. If my entire salary is tied to loan payments, I will still need somewhere to live and eat. Not to mention that I have 2 more children. And I paused. At least I think. Let's wait with the children, he said. Have you already decided what to do if they are not yours? Will you still be involved in their lives? I don't know, I said. It's too terrible a thought to think about. I'll have to wait until I know for sure before making such decisions. Don't forget about the other parts of your plans. Regarding the other lawyers, he reminded me. I'm willing to bet you get enough money from the lawsuit against her company to pay off the loan and get back to getting a full salary when this is all over. Not to mention demanding back the expenses from the father of the children if it turns out that they are not yours. Since this will occur after the divorce, it will not be considered part of the settlement agreement. Could you contact Robert on my behalf and see if he is interested in selling? I'm not sure I'm capable of that right now. He nodded. I'll call him and then let you know. We shook hands and left his office. I felt relieved as we left the building. Plans began to come together, which always gave me a feeling of deep satisfaction. Then I remembered why we made these plans. My relief disappeared, and I felt an emptiness in my chest. We were sitting in a diner having lunch when I dared to look at my phone again. Once again, I couldn't bring myself to do more than click on the link in the email before handing over the phone to Michelle, and again, I watched her face, waiting for the reaction that would tell me whether I had become a father or not. I'm so sorry, Gary, she said softly. This was the most unbusinesslike answer I have ever heard. She handed me the phone, and I read the results myself. Neither child was biologically mine. Although they had the same father, it just wasn't me. The double whammy of losing both my children was replaced by the rage I felt at the betrayal. Not only did she pass these 2 children off as mine, but she also convinced me to have a vasectomy, which meant I could no longer have children of my own. Gary, Michelle snapped, bringing me back to myself. Now is not the time or place. Keep calm. We will get through this, I promise. I took a few deep breaths, suppressing my anger. I really wanted to cause serious physical harm to someone. I even thought about hiring a hitman to kill the bastard who fathered the children who were supposed to be mine. Michelle pulled herself together again and led me out of the diner. Lorraine called, she said. She wants to see you. And we headed to Lorraine's office. Lorraine looked gloomy when we entered her office. I have a preliminary report from a private investigator, she said. Obviously, Caroline wasted no time. Last night a man came to your house and stayed the night. We couldn't look inside. I have cameras installed in the house, I said. I can go swap the flash drives and we can see what happened. Okay, she said. Go ahead and do it now, and then we can make a plan. I'm guessing the information on these flash drives will be important. There will be an au pair there, I said. I can't go back. It is believed that I will be out of town on business. Lorraine checked her phone. The au pair is at the play center with Sophie and James, she said. I'll keep an eye on her and let you know if she comes out. My house was about 30 minutes from Lorraine's office, and Michelle was driving fast. We got there without incident, and I changed the flash drives. He quickly examined the house, but did not see anything untoward. We then returned to Lorraine's office. We checked the flash drives. I decided not to look at the one in the bedroom. I didn't need to see what was happening there. It was clear that we were talking about a man as soon as he walked through the door. As I suspected, it was her boss, the man she worked for the entire time we were together, Bill Wainwright. What almost killed me was what happened when he pulled up to the house. First, he had his own key and entered the house. As he entered, James looked up and saw him. "Papa Bill!" he exclaimed and ran to hug him. This freed my hands. I broke down and started crying. I couldn't watch anymore. Lorraine watched as I broke down. Michelle, for the first time ever, hugged me and held me while I cried. It took a while, but eventually I pulled myself together. "Do you want to rest a little?" Lorraine asked, and I shook my head. The pain subsided a little, but anger began to take over me again. "What's next?" I asked. "I already have a copy of the terms of employment in your wife's company. There's an anti-fraternization clause, so you have a case against the company for violating it. Since the person with whom your wife is fraternizing is a top manager of the company cannot claim that she did not know about what was happening." We explained to Lorraine what my company's lawyer had told me and his advice. She burst into a huge smile. She picked up the phone and called him, asking for copies of the prenuptial agreement, and he emailed them to her. "This is just perfect," she said, reading the marriage contract. "Throw away everything I said before. Your boyfriend's plan is absolutely correct. If your partner wants to get rid of the company, buy him out. Put everything you have into a company, and it will immediately put it out of reach. We can sue her company for failure to comply with a court order, him for alienation of affection, her for making a false statement on her birth certificate, and both of them for money spent on the children so far. The deduction for medical bills for childbirth alone is a significant amount. It all depends on whether Robert wants to sell," I said. "I guess we'll have to wait until he comes with an answer." Michelle drove me back to the hotel, and I went up to my room. I was just about to sit on the bed when there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw that she was standing in the corridor. "Let's go," she said. "You can't stay here." "What?" I asked. "Why?" "Because you can't be alone," she said. "You will only brood or attack the minibar. I want you where I can look after you." While she was talking, she collected my few belongings. She took me by the hand and led me out of the room, then examined me and led me to her car. "Where are we going?" I asked, finding that I didn't care. "To my house," she said. "I have a spare room that you can use." "But," I began. She turned her head and looked at me. I fell silent. I had never been to Michelle's house and was surprised to see that it was almost the same size as mine. Our house had 2 floors, while hers had only 1 floor. She led me into a room with a bathroom. "Take a shower and change," she ordered. "Dinner in 30 minutes. We ate dinner in silence. I suppose it was delicious, but I didn't taste it. My mind was occupied with a whirlpool of thoughts that could not calm down. I was furious, but I couldn't find the strength to express it. I was devastated, but couldn't find the strength to worry. All I had enough energy for now was to implement my plans. I was on autopilot, my destination was set. I was just wondering what to do after eating when the phone rang. I winced and hoped it wasn't Caroline. It wasn't Caroline. "Hello, Robert," I said languidly. "Why?" That's all he asked. "Robert and I have been friends since university. We studied together, and it was the project we worked on together that gave us the basis for starting a business. At first I got most of the company because I had more capital to invest than he did. Caroline is cheating on me," I said, my voice wooden. "All this time." "All this time?" he said incredulously. "Do you mean none of the children are mine?" I told him. There was silence on the other end of the phone. "So you want to tie all your assets to the company and hide behind a prenuptial agreement?" he asked. Either Brian Spencer, our lawyer, explained everything, or he understood the partnership agreement much better than I did. "I want to keep 5%, he said, "and stay with the company as a consulting engineer. I will discuss the details with HR. The rest is yours." "Okay," I said. "I'll ask Brian to prepare the documents." "Gary," he said after a moment, "I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't feel that way to you now, but it will get easier later. I promise. I've been almost where you are now, and it's really getting easier." Only then did I remember that he got divorced about 4 years ago. I didn't know the details because even though we were friends, he was a very private person. I just knew it wasn't very nice. So he remembered the marriage contract. He used it himself. The next morning, Michelle woke me up with a cup of coffee. "Let's go," she said. We still have a lot to do. The first thing we did was go to Brian Spencer, the company's lawyer. He had already prepared all the documents for my buyout of Robert, and we completed the entire transaction in less than 30 minutes. I gave him everything I took from my home, my savings, and my 401k. I also had to take out a loan against the company pension plan for the remaining amount. Now, at least on paper, I was about $1 million in debt. My salary was almost halved because the benefits were taken out before taxes. Then we went to Lorraine's. I showed her all the documents for the deal, and she was delighted. "This is perfect," she said. "I'll draw up the documents today, and we can submit them on Monday if you want. We will serve it to him, her, and company at the same time. Where do you want her to be served?" "Where it will cause her maximum embarrassment," I said. "If you could do it through a billboard at the Super Bowl, I'd gladly pay for it." Lorraine laughed. "We'll serve her in the office," she said. "On Monday at 10 in the morning, provided that the papers go through the court before that time. If I send them today, I should have them tomorrow afternoon." I nodded. "So what now?" And I looked at Michelle. She ran things. "Now," she said, "we have 2 more stops before you go back to the office and pretend you just got back from fighting a fire in Portland. Do you think you can hold out at home until Monday?" "I think I'll have to," I said. "No need to guess," she said. "Tell me what is needed to help you hold out until this time." "I don't know," I said. "Any good news?" She smiled at me. "Then let's go," she said. To my surprise, we stopped at the medical center, where I had all my checkups and where I had the procedure. That meant I would never be a father from now on. "What are we doing here?" I asked. "Did you want good news?" she said. "Let's go." I followed her into the clinic and stood aside while she walked to the reception desk. The administrator nodded and motioned for us to sit down. We sat down. Less than 2 minutes later, my doctor came out and invited me into the consultation room. I looked at Michelle, who made no move to follow me. "Please?" I said, and she nodded and followed me. Dr. Harrington made no comment about my secretary's involvement in my consultation. He knew who she was, and that she was not my wife, since he was both my doctor and Caroline's doctor. Why I asked my secretary to come with me was my business, not his. "Gary," he said, "I understand that you wanted to ask about vasectomy reversal." My eyes widened. Is this even possible? I looked at Michelle. There was a tiny smile on her face. "Yes, it is possible." "Of course," said Dr. Harrington. "Since your vasectomy was performed 3 years ago, the success rate for reversal operations is about 95%. The surgery is a little longer than the original one and involves general anesthesia. But I'm confident you'll be able to father children again once we're done." And again, my eyes filled with tears. I still had a chance to become a father. It meant surgery, but it was a small price to pay for being able to have children of my own. I had no idea who I would have children with, but at least it was possible. "I know it's hard to accept," the doctor said. "Here is information about the operation and its cost. Unfortunately, it will not be covered by your insurance. If you would like to proceed, please let me know and we can schedule you for testing." "Thank you, doctor," Michelle said, standing up and taking the information from him. "We'll be in touch." Standing up, I also allowed her to lead me out of the clinic and towards her car. "Is this good enough news?" she asked, smiling softly at me. In an impulse, I hugged her and pressed her to me. "Thank you," I said, burying my face in her hair. Then I realized what I had done. I instantly let go of her and stepped back. "I'm so sorry," I said. "Gary?" she said softly. "Everything is fine." We got into her car. "One more stop, then back to the office," she said. I visited Bill Wainwright's house several times during the years that Caroline worked for him. He and his wife, Stephanie, lived in a nice area just outside the city. It was a gated community. They held some corporate events here. "Why?" I asked. Michelle simply got out of the car and walked to the door of the house. I followed her. She didn't even have to knock, Stephanie was told by the security guard who led us into the area that we were on our way, and she was standing at the door waiting for us. "Gary," she greeted. "You must be Michelle? His secretary? Was it you who called?" "Yes, and it's me," Michelle answered. "Come on in," Stephanie said. She led us into an office-like room off the hallway. I've never been in this room. Judging by the photographs on the table and on the wall, it was Bill's office. But she sat down at the table and pointed to the chairs opposite. She seemed to have decided that this was not a personal call. "How can I help you?" Stephanie asked, looking at me. I sat and looked at her, unable to speak. "Did you know?" I finally asked. Stephanie sighed sadly. "No," she said. "I suspected, but didn't know. I could never find any evidence, nothing that I could take to a lawyer, otherwise I would have taken the bastard for every penny he had." "Get in line," Michelle muttered. "Do you have evidence?" Stephanie asked, and I nodded. "Proof that none of my children are mine, that they have the same father. Video of him and Caroline at my house, where my son calls him." I couldn't finish this sentence. The lump threatened to choke me, and I was lost again. "Oh, Gary, I'm so sorry," she said. "I suspected for years that he and Caroline, but he was so careful." I followed him, checked his phone, email. I even challenged him, but he managed to convince me that I was just paranoid. The cops I used didn't find anything. Honestly, if I were sure, if I had evidence, I would immediately come to you. But I couldn't ruin what looked like a happy marriage based on suspicion alone. I needed to be sure, and I couldn't get any proof. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I wondered if I should tell my enemy's wife about my plans. It is unknown whether she will tell him everything as soon as he returns home. It might have been too late for him to do anything meaningful, but I wanted it to be as shocking for him as it was for me. "The question is, what are you going to do?" I asked. "Now you have proof." She smiled slightly at this. "I understand," she said, "and I don't blame you. I wouldn't say either. If you have the name of a good divorce lawyer, I would appreciate it." Michelle took a business card from her purse and handed it to her. "Thank you," she said. "Will a week be enough?" I nodded. "Great," she said. "I'll contact—" She showed the card. And I agree with her. She stood up. Obviously, our meeting was over. Michelle and I stood up. Stephanie came over and gave me a quick hug and a peck on the cheek. "Again, I'm so sorry," she said. "Look after him," she said to Michelle, who flinched when she hugged me. "He deserves better than what that bitch did to him." We returned to the office, and I spent the rest of the day finishing up the things I had to do while I was in Portland. At the end of the day, I went home. Michelle knocked on my door at her usual time, looked in, and said she was going home. She was back to being the professional she always was. This also left me feeling lost. I felt like I was starting to get a little closer to her, but that must have been just my imagination. I wished her good night, thanking her for her help. I worked late at the office and had a lot to catch up on. Message from Caroline arrived around 8. "What time will you be home?" "Probably another hour or two. I need to finish up some things after the trip. I'll probably be asleep already. I have to get up early in the morning. I love you. XX." And again, I could not bring myself to respond to this message. I continued working until almost 11. I really wanted her to be asleep when I got home. The less I have to communicate with her, the better I will feel. When I returned home, the house was in darkness. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I stopped by to see Sonia and James. They were both asleep and looking as adorable as ever. I felt a sob welling up in my chest and had to hide in the bathroom. I couldn't let Caroline catch me crying over children that weren't even mine. I still haven't decided what to do with the children. It's unlikely that any of them will remember me if I just leave them. I had no responsibility to them, but I still loved them both. How could I abandon them when, less than 48 hours ago, they were my children, my flesh and blood, my pride and joy, and now they were just more evidence of my wife's infidelity? I decided to wait and see what happens next. In any case, the decision may not be made in my favor. I went to bed, doing my best not to wake Caroline. I didn't fall asleep right away, and when the alarm clock woke me up in the morning, Caroline had already left. When I entered, the housekeeper was in the kitchen feeding the children. I looked at her. She should have known. It's impossible that she doesn't know this. Was she really still looking at me and laughing at the stupid lout who couldn't even satisfy his wife? Did she know that the children weren't even mine? Did she take the children to say goodnight to Papa Bill, as she so often did to me? My mind was wondering, and I was imagining her and Carolina having a dirty threesome with Bill Wainwright while the kids cried in the next room. I shook my head angrily. She knew I decided, and on Monday, I will take great pleasure in fearing her. I will do everything to ensure that this little bitch never works as an au pair again. I'll tell the agency that... Wait, what am I doing? I take my anger out on someone who has little hope that this situation will turn out right. You're damned if you do, and damned if you don't. If she told me she would lose her job, she could have left, I reasoned. But then it seemed that she also had feelings for our children, whom she looked after even before Sonia was born. I was angry, but perhaps not at the wrong person. Then I went to work. When I arrived, Michelle was already in the office. It was as if the previous few days had never happened. She was all business, although I noted in my planner that she had cleared my day for what she called marketing. I settled into my office and she brought me my morning coffee, as she did every day for 9 years of working for me. Then she sat down on the other side of the table. Only then did I notice that she had brought coffee for herself, too. This was something she had never done before. Marketing? I asked. Since when have I been involved in marketing? She grinned. It was a pretty evil grin, and for some reason, it gave me a warm feeling inside. We need to make a plan, she said, the last part of Lorena's strategy. I looked at her, not understanding. What? I said. Tell everyone, Michelle said. Her friends, family, church groups, volunteer groups, anyone and everyone she interacts with needs to know who she is and what she has done. It won't put me in a good light, I said. I'll become a laughingstock. A cuckold who can't even satisfy his wife is raising other people's children. You have to tell your story, she said. If you don't do it, then Caroline will, and believe me, it will make you look much worse than being an ignorant cuckold. What about an abusive husband? Or someone who abuses their children? People will believe this crap, and when we nuke her, she'll respond with everything she's got. Speak up first, and people will be less likely to believe any counter-accusations. Some, of course, will believe it, but nothing can be done. Michelle put together a media package containing all the evidence of Caroline's infidelity. There was a private investigator's report, a copy of the DNA report, showing that I was not the father of my 2 children. There were copies of videos taken in my house, including the one of James greeting Bill, and videos from the bedroom that I had not seen and did not want to see. Later that morning, I received an email from Lorraine. Apparently, Stephanie gave her a sample of Bill's DNA. She checked it against the DNA test I received, and it turned out that he was definitely the father of both children. I paused. Children? I thought. Suddenly, I stopped thinking of them as my children. We included this new information in a package and prepared them for submission. They will be sent to Caroline's parents, my parents, and Caroline's brother and sister, who I was very close to. Electronic copies will be sent to all her Facebook and LinkedIn contacts, as well as anyone else I can send them to. Those addressed to our immediate family, I paid a courier company for delivery at 10 in the morning on Monday, the exact time the balloon was supposed to rise. I just needed to get through the weekend. I had a plan to do this. Since I'm an engineer, it took me less than an hour to design and build the small device. It had a motor, a timer, and a battery. I could set it up so that the motor would spin, creating a vibration after a certain amount of time. When I got home on Friday night, I hid the device under Sophie's pillow after the au pair left. It was supposed to go off at 6 in the morning the next day, which is about the time we usually wake up. This would wake Sophie up and therefore eliminate our weekend morning sex. Everything worked perfectly. I was woken up by Sophie coming into our room and climbing into bed with us. As a result, no sex. I smiled to myself. I managed to keep myself busy for the entire Saturday. doing all the things Caroline had asked me to do for months. When she commented on this, I simply said that it was high time they were done, since she was pestering me for so long. On Saturday night, when unexpectedly Caroline tried to provoke me into sex, I pretended to be asleep when she came out of the bathroom, and on Sunday, her daughter came back to her room, having been awakened from sleep by my device. On Sunday, we decided to go for a walk with the children and spent the whole day at the zoo. There were several times throughout the day when I looked at Caroline, the woman I loved, the woman I thought loved me, and the two children I cared for, thinking they were mine, and I almost broke. I bit the inside of my cheek until it bled, trying to contain my emotions. But I made it through the weekend. On Monday, I was excited. I told Caroline that I would work from home. I wanted to talk to the au pair. Caroline left for work at her usual time, poking her head into my office to tell me she was leaving. I pretended to be engrossed in email and just grunted in response. You could hear her car leaving the garage and the door closing. I looked at the clock. 8:15. The au pair knocked on my office door. She wanted to take the children to the play center, but I said no, they should stay at home. This surprised her. I had never turned her down before, but she just nodded and went back to the children. I heard how upset James was that he couldn't go, but he really wanted to. A little after 9, Michelle arrived at the house. I was surprised, but let her in. For the first time since I've known her, I made coffee for her. At 9:30, we had a conference call with Lorraine. "Gary," Lorraine said, "this is your last chance to stop. I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying that if you changed your mind over the weekend, now is the time to say it." "No," I said, without any doubts. "Then I'll see you on the other side," Lorraine said. Everything was ready. I kept an eye on my email inbox, waiting for service confirmation emails to arrive. At exactly 10 a.m., the first one arrived, the second 3 minutes later, and the third 5 minutes later. Then my phone rang. It wasn't Caroline, as I thought, but my mother. "Gary." "Hi, Mom," I said. "What's happening?" she asked. "Did you read the package I sent?" I asked. "Yes, but..." "Then you know as much as I do," I said. "Caroline has been cheating on me, probably my entire married life with her boss. The children are not mine. I'm divorcing this bitch." "Gary, you can't..." "No, Mom. Listen, I have to work. I have other calls." I hung up. It immediately rang again. This time, it was Caroline. "Gary," I didn't answer, waiting for her to continue. "We need to talk," she continued. Still no answer. "I am going back home." She ended the call. "Caroline is on her way," I told Michelle. "I'll step aside," she said. I wanted to ask her to stay, but I didn't know how to do it. I just looked up at her. "Call me," she said, "when you find out what's going on." She left. Caroline arrived home about 20 minutes later. I heard her car drive up to the house. She didn't even bother going into the garage. I didn't know what to expect when she walked into the house. I didn't know whether she would come in armed or slip away with her tail between her legs. Anyway, she came into my office and sat down opposite me at the table. "Gary, she began. "Not interested," I interrupted her. "But..." "Not interesting," I said. "You don't even want..." "No," I said. "I don't want to hear a single word from your mouth. You lied to me for 9 fucking years. Neither child is mine, but you convinced me to get a vasectomy while you were still on the pill so you could continue with Daddy Bill." At these words, her eyes widened. "So no, Caroline," I continued. "I don't care what you have to say. My lawyer card is in the package you received when you were served. If you have something you think I should know, talk to her." "What about the children?" she asked. "What children?" I answered. "I don't have children, and if it were up to you, I would never have them. I would ask why you did this to me, but I don't want to hear another lie. I'm not interested in your excuses, justifications, or reasons. I want this to end so I can pick up what's left of my life and move on." I called the au pair into the room. She could hear me because my office door was open, and she was only in the next room. "You're fired," I said. "Immediately. Leave immediately." "What?" she said. Why? Because you covered for her, I said, pointing at Caroline. You knew she was having sex with her boss, and I don't know if you knew the kids belonged to him and not me, but you definitely knew what was going on. I have video evidence of you talking to Bill about children. Get out. Gary, Caroline said, you can't fire her. I pay her salary. The au pair looked at Caroline with a look of gratitude in her eyes. Okay, I said. I have already contacted the agency and informed them that you were complicit in an extramarital affair and agreed not to take any action against their company if they remove you from their register. So if Caroline wants to keep you, she will not only have to pay you, but also take care of all the other things like taxes, vacation, pension, sickness, not to mention insurance. The au pair's face lost color. Not only did she lose her job, but she was removed from the agency's books. This would make it almost impossible for her to find other domestic work. The agencies talked to each other. Now get out, I said, and she ran away. Did you have to do this? Caroline said. She shouldn't have. You started talking again, I said. I told you I don't want to hear it. What I want is for you to get your things, get your kids, and get out of my house. This is my home too, she said. According to the documents, no, I said. It is registered in my only name. So until the courts rule otherwise, get the hell out. She jumped slightly when I shouted. James entered the room. Mommy, he said. Sonia fell. Caroline, with a stunned expression on her face and tears running down her cheeks, stood up and walked towards her daughter. I closed my office door and stayed inside while she packed her things. A few minutes later, she returned, holding Sonia in her arms. Are you going to say goodbye to Sonia? Not this, I said. She is not my daughter and he is not my son. Take them to Papa Bill and let him take care of his children. They have nothing to do with me. Gary, Get out. She heard the front door close and a few minutes later, her car started up. She is gone. I released the breath I had been holding for what seemed like an eternity and crashed to pieces. I didn't hear the door open and I jumped when a pair of arms wrapped around me and I fell with my head in my hands. I looked up and saw Michelle holding me. She pulled me to her and hugged me as I sobbed. It took me a while to pull myself together again. I just threw away 9 years. My marriage, my children, my life are gone. I really didn't want to look at the world anymore. Michelle took matters into her own hands again. Let's go, she said. Lorraine said it would take Caroline about 4 hours to get an emergency warrant to occupy the house. Because she has children and this is a matrimonial home, she will be back. Do you really want to please her by throwing you out of your own home? We collected some of my clothes and all the important documents. I had to figure out where to stay, but I loaded my car in Michelle's car with my things and left. We first went to the office where I was serviced later that day. Lorraine called me to wait for the presentation. There was not only an order to occupy the house, but also a restraining order, meaning that I was forbidden to come within 100 meters of the house. If I want to pick up anything, I will have to make an appointment and be accompanied by Caroline's attorney at my expense. Not understanding what was happening, I discovered that I had moved into Michelle's spare room. All my clothes were in the closet, and all my papers are now neatly stacked in the office cabinets. A week has passed since Caroline filed. I would work and then go back with Michelle to her house to eat and then sleep. In the morning, she brought me coffee, cooked breakfast, and then we went to the office together. It seemed like nothing had changed between us. She was still all business, and other than a hug when I broke down at home on the first day, I never smiled at her. However, I had nothing to smile about anyway. On Monday morning, we had an appointment with the lawyers for the company that Caroline and Bill worked for. I didn't know the details, but apparently we filed a claim for an amount that the company couldn't afford. They had insurance, but the maximum amount was $1 million, and we were filing a claim for much more than that. Their lawyers were businesslike. Lorraine, my lawyer, grinned like a Cheshire cat. What needs to be done? Their lawyer asked. For you to agree to this? Immediate and permanent dismissal with loss of pension of the senior member, Lorraine replied, and also an obligation to keep Caroline on staff for at least 3 years and $1.5 million. I wasn't really listening as they exchanged words. In the end, they agreed to all of the above, but I would only get $750,000. This would at least pay off some of the debt I had to the company pension fund. All this will be paid after the divorce is finalized, said Lorraine. They nodded. They understood. Lorraine stayed with us at the next meeting. It was a meeting with Bill Wainwright's lawyers. I left their office $500,000 richer. Now I had enough money to completely repay the pension fund loan, and at the same time, I still had a small amount left on hand. Or I would have done so after the divorce. My last meeting of the day was with Carolina's lawyers. Carolina was in the office with them, but didn't look at me when I entered. Michele was with me, as was Lorena. This accounting in the divorce petition is simply ridiculous, Carolina's lawyer began. Your client is the main shareholder and CEO of a company whose value, according to recent estimates, is about $20 million. Not to mention the assets in the house, savings, and 401k. I suggest... Let me stop you there, Lorraine said, taking a sheaf of papers from her briefcase. According to the prenuptial agreement signed by all parties, the company is not subject to divorce. My client recently made a significant additional investment in a company that took most of his savings, his entire 401k, and his home equity loan. He also had to take out a loan from the company's pension fund. One of the partners wanted to get rid of the company, and it was important that the shares did not fall into the hands of a competitor who had been trying to take over the business for several years. Because the pension fund loan means he is now on a reduced salary. He is now being paid less than your client, and I will be asking the court to enter into some kind of maintenance agreement so that he can tide him over while he finds himself. What about the children? Asked her lawyer. There is DNA evidence that these children are not his, Lorraine said, that she deliberately falsified birth records to list my client as the father with the intent to defraud. In addition, and this is a separate issue, we are seeking to recover damages for serious assault when she knowingly persuaded him to undergo surgical sterilization, which he agreed to under the belief that he was the father of the children. The alternative is for your client to sign the divorce as is, pack up her belongings, and leave the marital home in his hands. She will receive half of the joint account, the balance of which at this time is $9,443.15. The lawyer looked at the papers, at the marriage contract, and then at Carolini. For the first time, she looked at me. Gary, please, she said. 9 years, I said. 9 fucking years. You lied to me for 9 years, day after day. You have nothing to tell me that I want to hear. Caroline looked at her lawyer and nodded. She signed the papers. I wasn't there when she left the house. I just received a letter from her lawyers saying the restraining order has been lifted and the house is now mine. I can return to the house any time. I thought about it but decided against it. Instead, I put the house on the market. It didn't quite match the amount I owed the bank, but I made up the difference and the bank walked away happy. 2 months passed and I was still living in Michelle's spare room. After our divorce, Caroline moved in with her parents. Despite all the evidence I provided, they were firmly on her side and would not talk to me. For me, it was not a loss. For some reason, Stephanie did not divorce Bill as she promised. I didn't know why, and I didn't want to find out. Because he lost his corporate job and pension, they had to sell their house in the gated community and move into a small apartment. Bill still had connections and skills in the market, so he was able to find a reasonable job and earn a living, although not as much as before. I don't know if she and Caroline met. I haven't seen her since that day at her lawyer's office and had no interest in doing so. I was sitting at my desk at work when Michelle knocked and entered the room without waiting for an answer. Bill Wainwright is dead, she said without preamble. What? I asked it. How? Apparently, Stephanie caught him with Carolini again, she said. She shot him. I leaned back in my chair, a huge grin on my face. I tried to remove it, but couldn't. Nothing could have happened to a nicer guy, I finally said. Michelle laughed. I'm angry? I asked her. Because I'm happy about this? Not at all, Michelle said. This bastard got what he deserved. By the way, this just arrived. She placed an official envelope on my desk. I looked at him in awe. We both knew what was there. I took it and opened it. "That's all," I said. "I'm finally a free man." "Finally," Michelle said. Then she did what I least expected. She kissed me. It was not a peck on the cheek or even on the lips. It was a full-fledged kiss with tongue, lips, and curling fingers. When she finally released me, I sat back in my chair, gasping, startled, and tense as the mainmast of a T-clipper. She giggled, looking down and seeing my obvious excitement. "For 9 years," she said, "I took care of you. You are the most perfect man I have ever met. You never even looked at me the wrong way, checked my legs or butt, or groped me, and I loved you for it. I've been waiting for you for 9 years, and now you are free. I know that you have always respected me, and this is also a kind of love. We're a great team. I know you as well as any wife knows her husband, and if you think about it, you know me just the same. Give me a chance to show you that not all women are lying, unfaithful, treacherous bitches. Please?" I was stunned. I remembered all the time I spent with her before I found out about the betrayal, and I thought about how I treated her. I vehemently defended her against my business partner to the point of getting him kicked out of the business. Then I realized that I had and still have real feelings for Michelle. I realized that it was impossible to work closely with someone for so long and not develop something. While I was with Caroline, there was no need to explore these feelings, to evaluate them, but now there was definitely such a need. "Do you have anything to say?" she said. There was an expression of concern on her face. This was the first time I saw her unsure. "How many?" I asked. She looked puzzled. "How much of what?" she asked. "Children," I said. "How many children should we have?" Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.